"I am aware," said the traveler, as he drew a sigh of deep delight after gazing on the sea entranced for nearly an hour. "I know that here, in my circumstances, 9/10 of the most fastidious of men would rest content. This panorama is indeed glorious, and I should rejoice in it but for the excess of its glory. The taste of all the architects I've ever known leads to them. For the sake of prospect, to put up buildings on hilltops, the area is obvious. Grandeur in any of its moods, but especially then that of extent, startles and excites, and that fatigues, depresses. For the occasional scene, nothing can be better, or for the constant view, nothing worse. In the constant view, the most objectionable phrase of grandeur is that of extent, the worst of extent, the worst phase of extent, that of distance. It is at war with this sentiment and with the sense of seclusion, the sentiment and sense which we seek to humor in retiring to the country. In looking to the summit of a mountain, we cannot help feeling abroad in the world this heartsick, avoid distance prospects as a pestilence. It was not until toward the close of the 4th year of our search that we found a locality with which Ellison professed himself satisfied. It is, of course, needless to say where was the locality. The late death of my friend, in causing his domain to be thrown open to certain classes of visitors, has given to Arnheim a species of secret and subdued, if not solemn, celebrity, similar in kind, although infinitely superior in degree, to that which so long distinguished Fonthill. The usual approach to Arnheim was by the river. The visitor left the city in the early morning. During the forenoon he passed between shores of a tranquil and domestic beauty, on which grazed innumerable sheep, their white fleeces spotting the vivid green of the rolling meadows. But by degrees, the idea of cultivation subsided into that of merely pastoral care. This slowly became merged with a sense of retirement. This again in the consciousness of solitude. As evening approached, this channel grew more narrow, the banks more and more precipitous, and the ladders were clothed in richer and more profuse and more somber foliage. The water increased in transparency. The stream took 1,000 turns, so that at no moment could its gleaming surface be seen for a greater distance than a furlong. At every instant, the vessel seemed imprisoned within an enchanted circle, having insuperable and impenetrable walls of foliage, a roof of ultramarine satin, and no floor, the keel balancing itself with admirable nicety on that of a phantom bark, which by some accident having been turned upside down, floated in constant company with a substantial one. For the purpose of sustaining it, this channel now became a gorge, although the term is somewhat inapplicable, and I employ it merely because the language has no word which better represents the most striking, not the most distinctive feature of the scene. The character of gorge was maintained only in the height and parallelism of the shores. It was lost altogether in their other traits. The walls of the ravine, through which the clear water still tranquilly flowed, arose to an elevation of occasionally of 150 feet, and inclined so much toward each other that, as in a great measure, to shut out the light of day. while the long plume-like moss which depended densely from the intertwining shrubberies overhead gave the whole chasm of air a funereal gloom. The windings became more frequent and intricate, and seemed often as if returning in upon themselves, so that the voyager had long lost all idea of direction. He was, moreover, enwrapped in an exquisite sense of the strange. The thought of nature still remained, but her character seemed to have undergone modification. There was a weird symmetry, a thrilling uniformity, a wizard propriety in her works. Not a dead branch, not a withered leaf, not a stray pebble, not a patch of the brown earth was anywhere visible. The crystal water welled up against the clean granite, or the unblemished moss, with a sharpness of outline that delighted bewildered the eye. Having threaded the mazes of this channel for some hours, the gloom deepening every moment, a sharp and unexpected turn of the vessel brought it suddenly, as if dropped from heaven, into a circular basin of considerable extent. When compared with the width of the gorge, it was about 200 yards in diameter and girt in at all points but one. That immediately fronting the vessel as it entered, by hills equal in general height to the walls of the chasm, although of a thoroughly different character. Their sides sloped from the water's edge at an angle of some 45 degrees, and they were clothed from base to summit, not a perceptible point escaping, in a drapery of the most gorgeous flower blossoms. Scarcely a green leaf being visible among the sea of odorous and fluctuating color. The basin was of great depth, but so transparent was the water that the bottom, which seemed to consist of a thick mass of small, round alabaster pebbles, was distinctly visible by glimpses, that is to say, whenever the eye could permit itself not to see, far down in the averted heaven, the duplicate bloomings of the hills. On these latter there were no trees, nor even shrubs of any size. The impressions wrought on the observer were those of richness, warmth, color, quietude, uniformity, softness, delicacy, daintiness. Daintiness, voluptuousness, and a miraculous extremeness of culture that suggests the dreams of a new race of fairies, laborious, tasteful, magnificent, and fastidious. But as the eye traced upward the myriad-tinted slope, from its sharp junction with the water to the vague termination in the folds of the overhanging cloud, it became indeed difficult not to fancy a panoramic cataract of rubies, sapphires, opals, and golden onyxes rolling silently out of the sky. The visitor, shooting suddenly in this bay, from out of the gloom of the ravine, is delighted but astounded by the full orb of the declining sun, which he had supposed to be already far below the horizon, but which now confronts him and forms from the sole termination of an otherwise limitless vista, seen through another chasm-like rift in the hills. But here the voyager quits the vessel which has borne him so far, and descends into a light canoe of ivory, stained with arabesque. Devices in vivid scarlet, both within and without. The deck and beak of this boat arise high above the water, with sharp points, so that the general form is that of the irregular crescent. It lies on the surface of the bay with the proud grace of a swan. On its ermine floors reposes a single feathery paddle of satin wood, but no oarsman or attendant is to be seen. The guest is bidden to be of good cheer, that the fates will take care of him. The larger vessel disappears, and he is left alone in the canoe, which lies apparently motionless in the middle of the lake. While he considers what course to pursue, however, he becomes aware of a gentle movement in the ferry bark, It slowly swings itself around until its prow points toward the sun. It advances with a gentle but gradually accelerated velocity, while the slight ripples it creates seem to break about the ivory side in the divinest melody, seem to offer only the possible explanation of the soothing yet melancholy music for whose unseen origin the bewildered voyager looks around him in vain. The canoe steadily proceeds, and the rocky gate of the vista is approached, so that its depths can be more distinctly seen. To the right arise a chain of lofty hills, rudely and luxuriantly wooded. It is observed, however, that the trait of the exquisite cleanness, where the bank dips into the water, still prevails. There is not one token of the usual river debris. To the left, the character of the scene is softer and more obviously artificial. Here the bank slopes upward from the stream in a very gentle ascent, forming a broad sward of grass of a texture resembling nothing so much as velvet, and of a brilliancy of a green which would bear comparison with the tint of the purest emerald. This plateau varies in width from 10 to 300 yards, reaching from the riverbank to a wall 50 feet high, which extends in an infinity of curves, but following the general direction of the river until lost in the distance to the westward. This wall is of one continuous rock, and has been formed by cutting perpendicularly the once rugged precipice of the stream's southern bank, but no trace of the labor has been suffered to remain. The chiseled stone has the hue of ages, and is profusely overhung and overspread with the ivy, the coral honeysuckle, the eglantine, and the clematis. Or is it eglantine? Uniformity of the top and bottom lines of the wall is fully relieved by occasional trees of gigantic height, growing singly or in small groups, both along the plateau and the domain behind the wall, but in close proximity to it, so that the frequent limbs, of the black walnut especially, reach over and dip their pendant extremities in the water. Farther back within the domain, the vision is impeded by an impenetrable screen of foliage. These things are observed during the canoe's gradual approach to what I have called the gate of the vista. On drawing near to this, however, its chasm-like appearance vanishes. A new outlet from the bay is discovered to the left, and in which direction the walls also seem to sweep, still following the general course of the stream. Down this new opening, the eye cannot penetrate very far, for the stream, accompanied by the wall, still bends to the left until both are swallowed up with the leaves. The boat nevertheless glides magically into the winding channel, and here the shore opposite the wall is found to resemble that opposite of the wall in the straight vista. Lofty hills, rising occasionally in the mountains and covered with vegetation and wild luxuriance, still shut in the scene. Floating gently onward, but with the velocity slightly augmented, the voyager, after many short turns, finds his progress apparently barred by a gigantic gate, or rather door of burnished gold, elaborately carved and fretted, and reflecting the direct rays of the now fast-sinking sun with an effulgence that seems to wreath the whole surrounding forest in flames. This gate is inserted in the lofty wall, which appears to be across the river at right angles. In a few moments, however, it is seen that the main body of the water still sweeps in a gentle and extensive curve to the left, the wall following it as before, while a stream of considerable volume, diverging it from the principal one, makes its way with a slight ripple onto the door, and is thus hidden from sight. The canoe falls into the lesser channel and approaches the gate.